Ta-da! We're back. It's that one special Wednesday every month where we sit around and we talk about nerd games. You might think that's every day and every Wednesday, and maybe that's also true. But on this specific Wednesday, we do it on stream. So welcome to those of you who are watching.
Yes.
We're Suspiric GuarDMs. We're back to talk about some cool shit, figure it out, and help you with your problems, your game-related problems. Not all your problems.
Say, swinging that door wide open.
Oh my god!
So tell me about your mother.
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
Oh man.
What do we got?
Yeah,
today?
dude, I'm excited.
We got a bunch.
Yeah.
Of stuff,
so we've got 4 questions. One of them's pretty dense. It's got several questions all kind of in one. So we could start with that one if you wanted to.
Let's do it.
Cool. Okay. So this question comes from Nicholas Jaquette, and he asks, do you, as a GM, try to feel whenever you're playing? Is it important to connect emotionally with the scene and the NPCs? How do you do it and not get overwhelmed by it? As a player, is it important to role play to the point of feeling real things? And are there levels of role playing? Like I said, there's a lot to unpack.
That's a big one, yeah. I would say generally it's good to get close to that point and then step back. I don't know if it's healthy or wise to feel your character's feelings. I think it's an easy way to become upset with other people in the game. It's an easy way to become... Yeah, I don't know. I think back to early games that I played. We played this like long-running game where we were all playing as Githyanki. Notorious game. When it was sort of, we were all Gith, so we were all evil, and there's lots of backstabbing and whatever, and it got kind of personal as it went on. And I just think like that's not good. You shouldn't do that. Now PvP isn't super common in games and stuff, but I do think even so it's easy to get wrapped up in my character feels this, I'm pretending to feel this, now I actually feel this, and now I'm sad, or now I'm angry, you know? Yeah, I would just generally say like get to close to that point, but then if you realize you're feeling the feeling, like step back, I would say. In both instances, you know?
Yeah. And it a lot of, kind of what he's talking about sounds a lot like method acting. And that's something that, like, with the theater training and stuff that I went through, it's not something that I ever ascribed to. I knew people who did, and it worked for them, and that was fine and great, but it kind of made them not a lot of fun to be around whenever performance wasn't on.
Yeah.
And to me, that camaraderie, that belonging to an ensemble is every bit as important as your performances on stage.
Yeah.
In that instance. And I feel the same way with table chemistry. You should be able to, when the game's done, still be friends with everybody, at least be cordial.
Yeah. And
I think that, like you're saying, I think if you take on too much of that emotional baggage, that too much of that bleed yourself, that it can be very difficult for your mind to separate fact from fiction. And yeah, that's not generally a good, it's mainly not a good thing, because a lot of the emotions that you deal with in game are typically negative. Really harsh challenges, the world is a dark and, desperate place, and all of that. So you don't really want to willingly go there, yourself, if you can help it.
If you think about games that you've watched and you think of like, or been in and think of great moments, they're often like arguments that you're having with other players, right? You're having like big, intense sort of like, and think of like our Momentum game. A lot of my favorite moments from that game where characters just like having it out, and like really going for it and stuff. But one of the great things about that game is I knew everyone sort of knew each other well enough to know nothing was being taken like beyond the game. I think there's like this idea with like acting that you should access your own trauma to bring out a better performance, and I just think that's like super unhealthy. And that's like a lot of Hollywood actors do it, so maybe it's a good way to feel real and look real, but I think it's not good for you long term, or even short term.
Yeah, I
You
would
know,
agree.
and I've seen games online where people are like crying or like that sort of stuff, and I just think that's not really what I'm there for. I'm there to like play a game with my friends, and like I don't know that we need, but it's a difference in what you're trying to do too. Because if your game is a performance almost exclusively, like if it's for mass consumption or whatever, then big reactions, big feelings and stuff, those are obviously what people want to see. And maybe there's value in doing it, but only if you know yourself that you can step back from it afterwards, and feel okay and
Yeah,
not carry it with you.
exactly.
Because you don't want it to sour into a feeling about other people who are at the table. If I have an argument with,
Hmm.
play a lot of like tense political intrigue games, so it's I'm like having this big argument, or even I'm working against another player secretly or something because we're playing this complicated game. Then I don't want that player at the end of this to think like Lloyd's such a dick for doing that. I want them to think the character Lloyd is playing is a devious bitch, but obviously that's not him, right? Like there's a
Yeah,
huge difference
exactly.
in that, I think. Yeah. I guess as a
Yeah, I would
GM, I,
agree.
I don't really think about it that much. I don't tend
Hmm.
to inhabit the characters as much when I'm GMing, because there's too many of them and you're spinning too many plates. Um, so I tend to, when I'm GMing, not go as deeply into the characters as I do when I'm playing. Um, I think that's just, but not because I don't want to, but just because it's like there's too many things going on for me to focus on one exclusively,
Right.
you know? Um, Too much energy is devoted to facilitating the table and managing the rules and managing the pace and all that sort of stuff, and making sure the information you're giving players is what you're supposed to be giving them and not too much and not too little. Like all that's happening. And so you can't lose yourself in the character, I think, in the non-player character. I think, while you're playing, you're just this person. So you can do whatever that person would do potentially.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I don't have a a goal typically to make a scene like super emotionally intense or heavy, but if it starts playing out that way, then I will absolutely run with it, as long as I can, and make it still feel like the pace is not being, harmed too much, or the other people that aren't involved aren't growing too bored with what's going on. Um, because there are times when that can lead to really great reveals for characters, and for the setting and things like that. When people really go hard in the paint with an emotion and they're really feeling it, um, I do my best to keep pace with it, to let it go on as long as it feels like it should. Um, but yeah, like if we end up, getting teary-eyed or something in a scene, like there's a part of me that's like, cool, like
Hmm.
that's good. Like, we managed to feel those emotions. And as a storyteller, especially, that's always my goal, is to emotionally move an audience,
Yeah.
whether that's my players or people who might be watching the game. If I do that, and in such a way that, like, at the end of the scene, I'm even caught off guard by where it went, and how far it went, then that it actually kind of makes me really happy.
Yeah.
um, but it's not typically my goal. It's, this is the information that needs to get across. This is, what I want to kind of have happen in the scene, the original intention or the motivation of whatever. um, and then we just start, and you just kind of have to go with it at some point.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean it is sort of a nice byproduct of a scene if there's real feelings being felt, but it depends on the kind of scene too, because I think if it's just like devastation or like heartbreak or whatever, that can be tricky.
Yeah, very true. It's a good point.
I don't really know how to fix it though. I guess like if I find that it's getting very, very heavy, I mean, it hasn't really happened to me. I guess I think what I would try and do is in the side chat sort of say, "Is everyone good? Do we need to move on?" or that sort of thing,
Yeah.
and then sort of look in that
Mhm.
direction because uh, you don't want someone like breaking down in the game or whatever, you know, or ever, ideally, but especially not in your game
Right.
that you're running and you're the sort of arbiter of, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That actually feeds really well into the question that Kenya just posted in the chat. What do you do as a DM if you see a player blurring the line between reality and fantasy? Yeah, that would be my answer. Would be call for a break.
yeah,
Um, check in with everybody. That's what safety tools are there for.
hmm
Um, and I think you should lean into them hard in a situation where it becomes, if it's obvious enough to you that that's going on, then
yeah.
it's probably
It's
that
there
someone
already,
else
right?
at the table, right, that is also feeling it.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's a good idea to just stop it before it gets too far.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Like if you notice it that you think it's going too far and you're not the person who's feeling it, then it probably has already gone too far. Um,
Yeah, 100%.
and yeah, I mean, I guess it's worth seeing, right? Like checking, and there's no harm in taking a break. I guess sometimes there's a feeling that if you stop in the middle of a heavy scene, that you can't get it back, you know? But probably
Yeah,
better to stop than have someone be very upset, you know?
exactly. Yep.
It's
Small
just,
sacrifices.
yeah. There was a third part to this question, right?
Yeah. So let's see. Do you feel whenever you're playing, is it important to connect emotionally with a scene? Um, to answer that, yes, I think so. Now, do you need to feel the exact emotion or emotions that are going on in the scene? Maybe not necessarily, but if you allow yourself, um, the best example that I can think of for this one is with horror games. I have to kind of tell myself or allow myself to be scared. Obviously, there's nothing scary. I'm sitting in my home.
yeah.
I have like bright lights shining on me. I'm sitting in front of a laptop, but I have to like tell myself, no, this is meant to be terrifying. I'm supposed to be scared here. And if I lean into that emotion and just kind of let myself pretend, then I enjoy myself so much more. So I think that kind of level of an emotional attachment, I wouldn't go so far as to say it's crucial, but I think it will heighten your enjoyment of the game.
Yeah, I think so too. I do that with NP. That's what I would do with NPCs is I tell myself like what's happening in the scene and how does this person feel? What's their reaction to what's happening or whatever, and then sort of go from there, you know? Especially in these like big, like I run a lot of these games that have like 30, 40, 50 NPCs, you know, and they all have to have their own shit going on. And so then I have to like ground myself in the scene. Okay, this person, and I do have like tools and stuff that I use to keep track of everything, but how does this person feel about this thing that's going on? Like, okay, I tell myself like they want X and they will do Y to get it, and they feel Z about it, you know? And that helps me like sort of figure out like, okay, in this moment, how is this person reacting? Is that their usual way of reacting? Are they being different sort of in the moment, you know? Um, when I can, when I have the brain power to
Yeah,
do that, you know? That's how I would like to enter those scenes. But yeah,
yeah,
definitely
that
an
makes
emotion
really
is a
good
good
sense.
grounding to start, I think, you know?
Hmm. Yeah, and like you said, emotion doesn't have to be part of every scene. There are times where we were just talking about Star Wars and stuff where most of the scenes that you see Darth Vader in, there is no emotion on display.
Mhm.
That's kind of his shtick. But then when there is emotion, it's from 0 to 60.
Yeah.
It's midnight to 6 o'clock kind of thing. It's immediate and severe, and I think that kind of thing can even be utilized as a tool. Like, play a character who is cold and calculated and
Yeah.
does not show emotion, and then whenever that one button gets pushed, the one thing gets mentioned, they fly off the handle. um, that typically is a massive alarm for
Mhm.
your players,
Yeah.
and they'll go, wait a second, and they'll start drawing connections. So you can absolutely use these kinds of things to your advantage.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a really good point. It's a really clever way of showing where a character's, I mean, weak spot is the wrong word, but like where their soft or tender parts are, what they are
Right.
upset about or easily upset about. I could imagine like you're dealing with Tywin Lannister and he's like pretending you're not there and barely talking to you and like writing a letter, and then you mention something that is important to him, his family or something, and like the quill scratches and that's as much as he shows, you know, that sort of thing. But that's a huge deal for someone who's so tight, you know. That's an interesting, yeah, that's kind of cool actually. I like that. A little
Yeah.
sort of gesture to show that this person who's always in control is not quite as in control as you think.
Hmm. Yep. Okay. Going back to the other parts of Nicholas's question, um, how do you feel it not get overwhelmed? We kind of touched on as a player, is it important to role play to the feeling of real things? Oh, are there levels of role playing?
Um, yeah, yes, I think so. I wouldn't say they're levels in terms of like quality. So not like, oh, this is a level 5 role player, you know. But in terms of how much commitment you put to it, I guess how involved you want to get from like third person rolling dice. So like, oh, he does XYZ, I roll the dice, or I persuade them, right? That might be like a 1 on the getting into it scale. Um, at least like emotionally investing sort of scale, all the way up to like a lot of the games that we would play where it's like whenever possible, if you think about it, you know, instead of they or he or whatever. And then having all of your as many of your conversations as possible in character, that sort of stuff. I think like there is a scale there, or like a spectrum of like how immersed. I guess that's the level I would think of immersion,
Yeah,
you know,
for sure.
um, because I don't think quality is something you can really quantify when it comes to role playing, you know, like. But I think in terms of
Yeah, it's
how
pretty
immersed you
subjective.
are and how like into it you are and how into your character you are and how real it feels, that's definitely there are levels of that, I think, you know. Um
Yeah, for sure. And like even like for me, there's different levels of role play that I bring to different games.
hmm,
With my home group, there's a lot more focus on the tactical combat side of the game.
yeah.
And again, we still have a ton of fun and still spend hours on end, sitting around the table talking and we do things in character and things like that. It's just not as intense.
Hmm.
So I don't show up to that game expecting there to be an hour and a half long dialogue,
Yeah.
between our characters. I just know that that's not a realistic expectation for that table. And vice versa, if I was going to be running a game for, a lot of the people that I've had the pleasure to run games for here in the community, I'm not going to come in with a gridded out battle mat and tokens and be like, all right, here we go. We're going to spend the next 3 hours, doing this combat turn by turn. Because it just doesn't work with this
Yeah.
group. Um, and I think being aware of that is a huge step, I guess, to
Right.
to playing long term on a table.
Right. Different people expect and want different things from role playing games, and there are definitely lots of people who like treat it like a tactical board game, and that's really fun. I do that too. And there are lots of people who treat it as I am literally a different person for these 4 hours. And there's lots of levels in between there. So I think like knowing which one your group likes is like the most important thing you can do in terms of like being a GM. Because if
You're here.
you could write the most incredible, like detailed intrigue, politic, like emotional game ever, and if you get a bunch of people who don't want to do that, it's useless, you know. Like it's not going to be a good fit. Like you got to find people who want to play the game that you want to run, um
Yeah.
or you got to run the game that people want to play, you know. Both are valid, I think, you know.
Right. Yeah, and again, that kind of comes back to session zeros.
Yeah.
Why another reason why they're so important is to lay those expectations out in front of you,
Right.
and agree on them. Because yeah, you don't want to show up to a game expecting it to be a really in-depth murder mystery with a lot of heavy baggage emotionally, for the characters who are coming in, and then everybody's like, okay, my name is Flurry
Yeah.
McButtstein, and I'm I wield a sword that's 8 feet long, and yeah, it's kind of like, whoa,
Yeah.
yeah, no thanks.
Yeah, I've become more and more explicit in my interest posts about what I expect from
Yeah,
players in the game, you know. um because here's a cool idea is one thing, but here's a cool idea and here's what you have to do as a player in my game, like, is a different thing. And I think like it just saves everybody a lot of time, you know, and a lot of heartache. Like if I'm going to run this particular game, then I want XYZ from it. That's why I'm running the game. I want to see these things. So if you think you want to do that too, great, but if you don't, like, then don't. sign up, kind of thing. So
Yeah.
I think more and more as I game, I just want to be like do like 90% of the work before we start playing the game. Like
Yep.
so clear about everything before we start, so that when we start, everybody knows what the deal is, what's going on, like that sort of stuff. Um,
Yeah, I very much agree with you on
yeah.
that.
Okay. Hopefully that helps, Nico.
Yeah, man. I hope that answered all the parts of the question. We have another one of his, but we'll come back to that in just a moment. Let's go to one from Connor Davies, who asks, monologues from the DM when you open a session, yay or nay, wherein the DM sets the scene visually, emotionally, etc., and bridges the gap between the session that you're about to play and the last. How long of a monologue before you fall asleep and stop listening?
I think the recap is not my favorite because I expect players to remember what happened, um, and take notes. I do think that an opening monologue can be very useful for setting the scene. I'll typically do it in the first session of a campaign. I'll do some sort of big style opening. Um, and depending on the setting, like I'm running a vampire game now, and there will be sort of occasional radio transmissions to give some information about the city, that kind of thing. But I usually I'm sort of known for this, is I just like hit go and then I'm like, okay, you're in the room, and like I would much rather just start immediately with like, Jeremy, you're in the room and the guy is looking at you and you've been playing dice for the last 3 hours, and he, like just throw you into it sort of. um but it's a difference in style. I think like a lot of people really like it, but I think
Right.
there's a fine line between like, here's me introducing the game and here's me showing off my monologue that I wrote. Like and I don't know where that line is, necessarily. But yeah, so to say is, I don't know.
That's fair. And I come from it from an entirely different mindset. I do love opening monologues. For me, it is a very clear, definitive switch from whatever has happened before the game is starting. Because when I run my games, I like to try to give the players a chance to introduce their channels and what they might have going on, and kind of break the ice a little bit, and get everybody kind of relax and whatnot before we start. And then I want there to be a very clear break, and now we're in gaming mode, as it were. But it also allows me to not typically to recap as much. I do some recapping, but I spend most of the time of the monologue kind of setting where we're going to be rejoining the characters. As a passage of time, a couple of days have gone by and now this is the status quo. Or establishing things like the mood and the tone of the particular session. Like if I know that there's going to be some bad news that's going to be coming, and I want that to have a little bit of a heavier impact, then I'll usually start us off on a dour note. And that way there's a little bit of a context for the players to pick up on.
Yeah.
That, okay, I get what he's going for, and hopefully they can then do what they need in order to help facilitate that tone. They understand the mission, so to speak.
Yeah. Yep. I think, yeah, it's definitely useful. You're really good at it. So I think like that helps.
Well, thank you.
Because I think you have a good idea for one, how long it should be, and two, what you're trying to achieve with it. There's a big difference between that and like a big lore dump at the start of a session, or like,
Oh yeah,
that sort of stuff. I don't think that's super useful. But I'm not the best
I
person
would
to ask
agree.
because, yeah, like I say, I literally start the session. I don't even get people to say hello or anything. I just like hit the button and we're going.
Right.
So yeah, I don't have a super strong opinion about it because I never do it. Right.
Yeah, and I would have to agree that there are certainly ones that I have sat through and gone, "Ooh, this was a mistake."
Mm-hmm.
Like this was too long, or like you said, it's too much unnecessary exposition. And as far as how to know what that is, I don't know. Like you have to learn how to again read the temperature at the table. You know, if you can see that people are tuning out and are not paying attention, then you got to make it shorter. Do what you can, but you know, just be mindful of the purpose that it's serving. Don't do it just because you think you should do it.
Mm-hmm.
Like make it serve a purpose. And I think that's the case for anything that you're going to include in your game, any scene or encounter that you're going to put in your game. If you're doing it just to award XP, then it's probably not going to be that interesting.
Right.
But you know, make it serve a point, make it push something in your story forward, or be a challenge for your party or one of the PCs. Make it matter. And then I think the same with the monologue. If you make it matter to what's going on, then your players will pick up on the information that you want them to pick up on. And then you can just focus on just getting that out and then move on.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so too. Set the scene, give the information you need to give, but keep it as short as you can, I think. Punchy. Brevity and the soul of wit and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I try to limit mine, I think, to like 2 paragraphs.
Yeah.
Maybe 2 to 3 sentences a piece.
Mm-hmm.
That's my rough kind of guideline for length and brevity.
Yeah.
But it's mainly just about how it feels right, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, hopefully that answers your question, Connor. But yes, I am definitely for them. Let's see. We have a question from Mike Byrne. And he says a question that he gets all the time. How do you make first timers comfortable in their first session?
That's tough. I don't do a lot of first sessions anymore. I think I have done it like several times with new groups and stuff, and I think like you want to, depending on the system you're playing, basically do a tutorial. I think, you know, you're gonna say, in this game we're going to look at how a dice roll works. We're gonna look at how interacting with another character works, like an NPC, like talking with them. We're gonna look at how a fight works or whatever. I would say start with action for sure if people are new to the game. You want to not have them think about what to say as their character as much as possible early on, because they won't know and they'll feel weird pretending to be a different person if they haven't done it before. So there'll be a lot of like sort of stuff, and I think you want to avoid that at all costs. So like start with a fight where they say, okay, I want to do this. Okay, great. You do it. It looks awesome. You tell them how it looks. You tell them how I would do I've done that often. The first round of combat, I'll tell them what it looks like, and then the second round of combat, I'll get them to tell me what it looks like, and just so they have an idea of like what's expected, how long this description should be, maybe even, you know, that sort of stuff. Because so many of these things we take for granted and as normal are skills we've learned over hundreds of hours of playing RPGs, you know? Like it's not instinctive or intuitive to be like, I should spend less than 30 seconds talking about my action, right? Like that's not, you don't know that, you know, when you start. Or how should I talk to other characters in the game is like a real mystery. Do I talk to my friends who are my actual friends? I'm sitting across from them. Do I have to pretend and put on a voice? Is that what I'm supposed to do? That sort of stuff is all a big question when you start, you know, if you haven't played before. So try to, as much as possible, guide them through these like new things they have to experience, and like set up some places where they can try out those things. Like an encounter with an important person and an encounter with a not important person are really useful, I think. Just to get them sort of familiar with like where they fit in the world and how you talk to different people as your character in the world, that sort of stuff. But yeah, it's complicated, I think. Like you're really trying to show them like this whole new skill that they don't know anything about yet. But yeah, that's what I've done previously, I guess.
Yeah, and I think all of those things are important. Not lessons, that's the wrong way to put it, but they're important steps, you know, to experience as a new player. How would I make a first time player comfortable? First and foremost, I want it to be clearly understood that they can ask me questions at any point, and not be afraid to disrupt the flow of things to do so. I hate hate tables where people are discouraged from asking questions
Yeah.
about the why of something, or when they need clarification on something. And to have a group of players or a dungeon master who, like, yeah, well, you don't really need to understand that, just roll the dice. Like, that's a horrible thing
Yeah.
to do. I think that's a great disservice. um I would much rather us delay the game so that you're on the same page with everybody. And again, for me, that's an opportunity to potentially form a lifelong love for someone, of gaming. And if I can explain to them why we're doing something, and they feel comfortable in their understanding of the situation, they're much more likely to come back again.
Yeah.
And it's going to be a more positive experience in the long run, I think.
I've done stuff like, you tell me what you want to do and I'll tell you how
Yeah.
you do it.
Mm-hmm.
I explain to you how you do it, right? So, because you don't want them to be freaking out about like how to do the things on their character sheet. You want them to go, okay, I want to swing from the chandelier and then hit that guy. Great, awesome. So then you need to do an athletics check. So go ahead and roll that and like explain it bit by bit, right? You really don't, like you were saying, you really don't want them to just be like freaking out about how to do anything and nervous to ask about
Very much
anything,
so.
right? Like,
Yeah.
yeah, that's super essential, I think, is like making it clear that there are no stupid questions, and questions are like heavily encouraged, I think.
Yeah, and I'm even that way with seasoned players.
Mm-hmm.
I run a lot of weird systems that I find here and there, that
Yeah.
a lot of times I don't even fully understand even before I start running them.
Right.
Which is not the best idea necessarily, but um, you know, I think it's just healthy to build that up as an understanding at a table in general. Just, if at any point somebody's not certain of what's going on, has a question, has a reason that they need to take the conversation in a meta direction, then it's okay to just press pause, address that as long as it
Yeah.
takes, and then go back to what we're doing.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I guess I like to cultivate early the idea that it's just like always okay to talk about the game while you're playing the game,
Yeah.
because I think like new players I find especially have this idea, especially with D&D, that like metagaming is the worst thing you could do. They hear that, I guess, from, I don't know, YouTube or whatever, that like, if you're a metagamer, you're cheating. You're not. Like, we're playing a game. We're playing a board game, and you're asking me the rules of the board game. That's okay,
Exactly. Yep.
Like, it's not a big deal, and I would much rather we like talked about the game like outside of the game for a second than anyone feel confused or not sure or whatever, right? Like, it's like one of the great disservices of like D&D online in the internet is this idea that like metagaming is this horrible crime that you're committing. I
Oh
don't know where
yeah.
it comes
And
from, but
even before D&D really went virtual, that was something that I had heard, in the
mhm.
circles that I played in a lot. I used to play with a DM that actually would dock you XP points for talking out of character. So like you take like a 10 XP penalty or whatever at the end of the session, and like it was nuts.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's, to me, that's unhealthy.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
there were times when I pulled shit like that as a young dungeon master. If people were on their phones too much whenever that started becoming a thing at the table. But I very quickly realized that that's not the kind of table that I want to run.
Yeah.
And it was taxing on me even trying to keep up with it, and I felt
Right.
horrible every time. So I was just like, why am I doing this? Like, why this isn't important.
Yeah.
So
Also, like, punishment is not the right way to fix that problem if you have
yeah,
that problem,
100%.
Like, that's not going to make it any better. Like, you giving out to them for, like, the reason they're on their phones is not because, it's because they don't enjoy the game somehow, or something's going on in their life or whatever, but, like, you lose XP because you did this one is just like the worst possible solution to the
Yeah.
situation,
Yep.
like,
I agree.
but yeah.
Yep. It's definitely not one of the good table habits that I picked
No.
up on early on in my career.
I think that's the thing though, like early too, I had a lot of shitty habits too, and I definitely thought this about metagaming and a lot of stuff. But as you keep playing and you play with better people, you like get better habits, right? Like, it's always going to be improving.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's a really good, well, it's a good motto for life in general that I
Yeah.
think more people should understand, is that you don't ever stop developing and learning. You shouldn't. And if you do, then you've stagnated. And what happens when things are stagnant? Well, they get gross.
Yeah.
They get nasty. So, you know, you have to be constantly looking outside yourself for answers to things and different ways of doing things, and testing that against what you know to be true versus, you know, this new information. And it, you know, grow, expand, change. It's okay.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's healthy, you know.
Right. Yeah, I think if I look back now at games I ran 5 years ago, I'd be like, ugh, you know. Because yeah, you're always, especially with something like role-playing games, I think you're learning really quickly new things, and every time you play with a new group of people, you're learning new skills and new things.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
it's really an experience thing. It must be overwhelming to start now because there's so much information out there now. Like,
I can't even imagine.
even the difference between like when I started playing online, which would have been like maybe 6 years ago or so, to now, like it's exploded in that time, and now it feels like, where would you even start? You know, like I just have
Mhm.
no idea.
Yeah, and the thing is that it's like all art and all entertainment, it's all subjective. You know,
Mhm.
it's not about there being a right answer and a wrong answer. It's really just the answer that works best for you, or in this case for you and your group.
Mhm.
And it's really just a practice of kind of weeding through the options until you find the
Right.
series of things, you know, the toolkit that you've assembled that does work for you.
Yeah.
um
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
for
and
me,
getting
it's
rid of the
been
rest.
a long journey to find the kind of game I like to run, and that's fun for me to run.
Hmm.
Um, and that's true experimentation. You got to try them all, and then you find the one that you like, and then you try several versions of that, and then you're like
Yep.
an algorithm, right? You're figuring it out bit by bit. Like, what did I like about this game? Okay, I'll try this part. I'll try this part, and keep going until you find something you really like. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. It's there's a lot of similarities to like the terrain building and painting miniatures and stuff. There are paintbrushes that I have that are cheap,
Hmm.
but they're my go-to brush
Right.
to do a specific kind of thing, you know, to
Yeah.
do a specific kind of technique, because I know what outcome I can produce with that tool.
Yeah.
And understanding that is far more useful than just having the best tool, the most
Definitely.
expensive
Yeah.
tool. It's all about what you can do with that thing. And I think it's the same kind of thing with role-playing games, with running a game, is you have to understand what is in your Batman utility belt. You have to know those tools, and you have to understand when to go to which tool. You know, when you get into that
Yeah.
situation of, you know, oh man, they're not going to find the crucial piece of information that I really need them to. What the hell do I do? Instead of just being caught completely off guard, if you have yourself, you know, a tool in your tool belt, you can go, I know which one I need, and you can go straight to it
Yeah.
and use it. And more often than not, it works.
Yep. Yeah, a lot of things like that you just sort of figure out with time. I have like, I don't know, a bunch of ways that if I need to think of something complicated, that I'll like present a scene between two characters. I'll make them talk and then I can think. Stuff like that, right? Little
Yeah.
things that you learn
Yeah.
over time where it's like I have to, because they've gone a direction I wasn't expecting or something, you know? Um, and when you first start, that's a nightmare, you know? Like I've
Yeah,
only prepped
it
this
is.
specific thing, and if they go outside of that, I have no idea what to do. Like, yeah. So you learn that over time, I guess, you
Yeah, very
know?
much so. And it's just kind of the way of anything, really, you know, anything that is part art form, you know, when it's not just simply a, oh god, people that cook are going to kill me. It's not as simple as like following a recipe, you
Hmm.
know, where if you do these steps at the end, you'll have this thing. Again, cooking is an art form, please do not get me wrong, but you can make macaroni and cheese if you follow the instructions on the side of the box, even if you've never made macaroni and
Yeah.
cheese before. But you know, it it gets better over experience,
Yeah.
and there just isn't a replacement for experience.
Yeah.
So as much as that answer sucks to hear for people who are
Yeah.
just starting, because it's like, you know, oh well, you just have to have, you know,
Yeah. You'll
time.
be good at it
um,
eventually, you know?
right, exactly. But there just honestly isn't a better answer.
Yeah. that is one of the hardest parts, I think, with telling new people how to get better. It's like you just got to do it a lot, like and it's like, oh, how am I going to get good at playing the guitar? Like you have to practice a lot. You have to keep doing it until you're good at it. That's unfortunately there's not really a shortcut. Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's very true. Practice, practice, practice. And you mentioned something earlier that I also think is important to kind of draw further attention to, and that is play with new people. It is scary sometimes to play with people that you don't know, who are unproven anomalies, if you will. But like for me, that's why I run a lot of one shots, is because I get to play with a whole host of people that I've never played with before, a lot of times. And I am able to see who I might want to put into a long-term game.
yeah,
Who, if I can understand kind of what makes them tick as a player and kind of what they would bring to a table, then I can start to kind of feel how they might fit with a collection of, 3 or 4 other players. And then I can start to kind of envision the kind of game that would be able to run with that group of people.
right.
So learning from new people, though, is always valuable. Even if you have a negative experience with someone at the table, that is still a valuable lesson. You'll at least walk away understanding something that you don't want to do at the table ever again.
Right.
Something that you'll avoid and hopefully be able to head off at the pass before it gets as bad as it did that time.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I think so too. It can be very tempting to just continue to play with the same people. I'm guilty of that for sure. I know the kind of games I like to play, and I know the players who play like the game I want to run. But it's totally valuable and always worth it, I think, to like play with new people. That's how you find new friends, I think,
Yeah, very much so.
gotta
And
take the
even just
plunge.
from the point of view of bettering yourself,
Mhm.
I am the game master that I am today because I have played under so many different GMs.
Yeah.
And when I'm playing under them, yes, I'm having a good time and all that kind of stuff, but I'm also taking notes.
Right.
I'm learning from that person, and good and bad, like, ooh, I would never do that. Like,
Yeah.
and I know for a fact why I wouldn't do that, because I know what it makes me feel like as a player.
Right.
Or, ooh, I really enjoyed the way that this person handled this particular situation. I'm going to remember that. I'm going to try doing my next whatever that way and see how that goes.
Yeah.
And that's how you build your utility belt, is by seeing other things in practice.
Yeah, it's all theft, in a good way. Like you're just stealing things
Yeah.
other people do and then making them your own as much as possible. Um, and yeah, the more games you play under certain GMs, the more, and you like those games, then the more of those tools you'll sort of take. I mean, I think that's why like I play under a lot of like in Nico's games a lot, and I've taken a lot of tools from him, and he's taken them from me, I think, or I'd like to think. Um, and then your games start to get similar, but it's good because you both like those games. So like, yeah, I think it's super valuable. Like play under lots of people, play with lots of people as much as you can manage, so that you can learn new stuff, even if it's scurry.
Yeah, sure. And I mean, a lot of it just comes down to being mindful when you're playing, just
Mhm.
understanding the whys and the hows, and maybe even asking, if somebody does something in a game that you think is really awesome and you want to know more about it. I guarantee you there's not a GM on the planet that I know of that if you went to them and said, hey, I really like the way you handled this, would you explain it to me more,
Yeah.
that would say no thank you.
Yeah.
Everybody'd be like, all right, get some paper,
Yeah.
here we
Let
go.
me.
Yeah, I mean, so why not?
Yeah.
That's how great conversations start, in my opinion. It
Mhm.
leads to this kind of roundabout where we can sit down and hash this shit out in
Right.
front of people,
Right.
and people actually tune in and watch
Yeah.
this.
Okay, will we do another question?
Yeah, we have another one from Kenya again, in the audience. What do you do when you reach out and check in, but people don't reciprocate and do that, and you suddenly have drama and issues?
That's a life question, not a game question. um,
Very fair. Yeah.
I think yeah, it's tricky. With running games online, you are everyone has a life, right? You got 5 people, I mean, typically on different sides of the planet, but all have different lives. And that can be tricky. And sometimes things happen to people and I don't know, like, I think for a lot of people, this is like a luxury thing that they do, you know? Certainly, like, I mean, we've always said, and I know you say this as well, like real life comes first. That's how it works. And like, that's sort of the baseline. Like, if people have stuff going on in their lives and they don't want to talk about it with people they're just playing games with, like, it's nice to play games with like your good friends and stuff, but that's not always the case. And even if it is, nobody wants to talk about everything in their life. I don't know about suddenly having drama and issues. I don't really. I don't know. That's tricky. That's a communication thing, I guess, but it's not your responsibility to have other people communicate with you. Like, that's their responsibility, you know? You can only do so much. And if you're reaching out, you're doing it already, I think, you know? Yeah. Tricky one to answer.
Yeah, very much so. And I'm just going to underline everything that Lloyd just said, because I'm in agreement. Like, if you're trying to extend that bridge of communication in a healthy way to someone and they're just not meeting you, then they don't want to communicate with you, or they lack the tools to understand how to do so.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, in both of those situations, you've gone as far as you can. Now, if they make it clear to you that they do want to communicate and they're just not sure how, then you have a place to start, and yeah, unfortunately, that is more of a psychology issue and not as much a game master issue.
Yeah.
But I mean, yeah, if you mean like what to do if people aren't, like, if someone else is running a game and they're not reaching out to you as a player, then I would just open that communication up. Just say, hey, sometimes this gets a little rough. I don't know about for everybody else, but at least for me, do you think that maybe we could periodically kind of check in with everybody, see if people are doing okay?
Yeah.
I know I need that. And it would be really, helpful to me. I don't think there's anything shameful or wrong with bringing it up just as frankly as that.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I don't know. It's like you're doing the thing. You're already doing it if you're reaching out. Like, you're doing as much as you can do, and people either like don't want to or are not capable of answering you in the moment, but that's not your responsibility, you've already tried. And you can try again if you want. You can try as many times as you want, but it's not your responsibility to manage other people. Even in your game, you can't manage, like, you can manage them in terms of like, are you going to play the session or not, but you can't manage their lives. It's not your responsibility or like your right. You can't tell people what to do, really. Yeah, I don't know. It's a tricky situation. I don't really I mean, I don't know about drama. I don't often have a lot of drama. Sometimes people get upset about canceled games or games being postponed or whatever, but it's like, I don't know, at the end of the day, people have lives, and that makes it impossible to play sometimes on short notice. And like, I don't really see how it helps to be upset about that.
Yeah,
like, I might be disappointed in the moment, or I might feel bad because it's me or whatever, but that's what has to happen. So there's no point after that being shitty about it. I think, it's like, this is the situation. Like, as it's presented. Like, I can't make the game. I know it's 20 minutes before the game. I feel bad about it. Sorry. Then everyone goes, okay, that's all you can do. Like, there's no point in you being like, what, doesn't matter. They've said it already. Like, they're not coming, So what use is it in you being pissed off about it? But I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's very similar actually to what my wife and I have tried very hard to teach my son. He's 13 now, and what we've always tried to be cognizant of is it's okay for you to feel angry. It's okay for you to feel upset, sad, disappointed, frustrated. All of those things are okay to feel. You just can't let it dictate the way you behave. Is what it comes down to. Like, learn how to deal with those negative feelings in a way that you can vent them and get them out of your system in a healthy and positive way that doesn't impact everyone else as much as possible.
Yeah.
So if you have a struggle, if you're struggling to deal with the emotions and you can't figure out how to vent them, then come to us and tell us that that's the way you're feeling, and we'll deal with it. I think that's the only way to handle drama and
Mm-hmm.
issues. Is sometimes emotions get too big for us to handle, and we do need help in unpacking them.
Yeah.
And just sometimes having someone tell us, hey, this is okay, we'll be able to get to the other side of this eventually. Here's some things that maybe we can try, to work on. Unfortunately, drama and issues are prevalent in any group of people, and a lot of times in any relationship, especially when there is a breakdown in communication. And I think that if someone is upset about something and doesn't communicate that, then that frustration becomes a festered pool.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then eventually it's going to bubble to the surface, and then it's going to be a very unhealthy conversation. And it just happens, unfortunately.
Yeah. I would say that, like, if you're reaching out and trying, you're already doing more than most people, Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I can be a goldfish brainy where, like, if I'm not looking at it, it doesn't exist, So I'll schedule the game and forget about it, I'll and I really want to play that game, but I'll just forget. My brain will be like, "There's not right in front of you, it's gone." So it can be useful to, like, for me to be reminded, sort of, because I'll just forget, But it's not the big thing is, like, that's not me personally not caring. It's me just having a brain that's not super efficient at remembering lots of tasks, So that's the other thing, is you can't control other people's actions, but you can control how you feel about them and how you react to them. And you can choose to give the benefit of the doubt in those situations, right? Like, you can choose to think, oh, he doesn't care about the game because he doesn't check in about it or whatever. Or you can think, maybe he's just, like, forgetful or busy or whatever, Like, you can sort of convince yourself either way, I guess. And I, for one, sort of just think, like, they're probably just busy. Like, everyone has a life and work and family and all this other stuff going on. And, like, sometimes you don't want to check in on all your games and say hello or whatever, Also, the first thing I do every time I join a group chat is I mute it. Like, literally the first thing I do. So I'll just often not see it,
Yeah. One of the very most important things that I think I learned growing up, and there's a lot of people in my family that have the tendency of making everything into a personal slight. Right. If you say something, it's like, what did you mean by that? Like, why were you saying that about me? And someone somewhere along the way said it to me, and it was something I latched onto, is the majority of the time, it has nothing to do with you.
Totally.
When somebody is acting a dick, or, is forgetful, or it very rarely has anything to do with you. It's all from your perspective. And so you have this natural tendency to go, well, what did I do wrong? What did I say wrong? They just don't enjoy playing in my games, or, whatever your psyche builds up in your head. And it very often is not the case.
It's one of those things where it's like, do you remember that time when you were 9 and your friend did that horribly, like, embarrassing thing that keeps them up every night? No? Okay, yeah, nobody cares about your shit either. Like, no one remembers any of the shit you've done. No one thinks about you most of the time. They're thinking about themselves. Like, and not in, like, a mean way. Like, people do care about you, but most of the time people are thinking about themselves, just day to day. Like, the idea that, like, when you go to sleep and you think, does everyone remember when I was a little kid and I did that? Like, nobody gives a shit or remembers about it, Literally nobody gives a shit. Like, people don't care.
I do, Lloyd. Yeah, I remember that time.
We all remember when you did it. Yeah, but everybody else, no, But it's just when,
talking about that time when you were a kid.
Yeah. But it's like, most people are not thinking about you as much as you think they are.
Yeah.
Or about anyone, They're mostly thinking about themselves and their problems and their situations. Like, they're not really thinking about you that often. And certainly not to the extent that you think they are,
Right. And especially not the out to get you, extent, where they're trying to, like, do things to undermine you or, get on your nerves. It's just, it's a silly way to view the world.
If somebody is shitty to you that is not a shitty person, the chances of it being about you are, I would say, like slim to none. You know, like it's
Yeah,
almost never
exactly.
going to be about you. It's going to be about something that happened in their day that's separate to this, and they are having trouble regulating how they react to things, right? Like, yeah. So
Yeah.
there's our psychology lesson for the day. We're
Lay down on the couch.
both qualified to talk about this.
Carrie and I did a help action last night. We're like, we're solving the world one RPG question at a time. We have another question from Alice. She asks, what if you, as a player, have problems with another player, but don't like conflict? So you try to talk to the player and help them work on it, but they still use toxic behavior in and out of character, and you worry about causing issues with everyone. How would you approach the GM?
That's true. I'm not particularly conflict averse. So I would probably personally just say something, but I would say that if it's about a game and it's about the game you're playing in, then I would approach the GM and just say, here's the situation, lay it out as like neutrally as you can, as factually as you can. Because I think the thing is, like a GM, anyone, any human, has too much stuff going on in their life to now get drawn into this drama, doesn't want to be drawn into this drama, right? Nobody really wants that. So I think the best thing you can do is to be like, hey, here's the situation, here is what has happened, and here's why I feel this way. Can you help? And the answer is probably going to be, yeah, okay, I'll just talk to them. If the answer is no, then you just leave the game, right? Unfortunately, is the other option, you know, which can suck for sure. But I don't know what else you can do.
Yeah. Again, you know, it kind of goes back to just the way you should operate in life in general, in my opinion. Like, you communicate first, open the line of communication if it's not, and if it's damaged, then try to repair it into a healthy line of communication, because I don't think any relationship is ever going to function properly if the communication is not healthy, at least not a long time. And if you cherish that relationship, then it's worth working on. If not, then yeah, seek a mediator. You know, find somebody who's an in-between, who hopefully can be partial. And if the situation gets to the point where it's obviously unsalvageable, don't just take it and just so that you can stay a part of the game or honor a commitment or any shit like that. Like, you know, don't be okay like hanging out in toxic pools. Like, it's going to be bad. Get out, you know, go somewhere else. No one, especially this day and age, no one is so limited in their options that you have to settle like that.
Yeah.
So don't.
I think like set a boundary with them. If you've talked to the person already, right? Like the person who's causing the issue. So talk to the GM if they can't fix it, or if they're unwilling to. Then you can talk to the other person again and say, the situation is this. If you continue to do these specific things, I'll leave the game because I have to.
Yep.
And I think then if they continue to be shitty, then you're better off leaving the game, you know?
100%.
If you explain to this person that these things are like really bothering you and they will cause you to leave the game, and they continue to do them, then you don't want to be hanging out with this person, I think, you know? And that can be hard because games are fun. But it sounds like this one is maybe not so fun. And you don't have to put up with bullshit from people. There are so many games you could be in, you know?
Yeah, exactly. 100%. Yeah. I would agree with you completely, Lloyd. Talk to the person. If it doesn't get better, talk to the dungeon master. If it still doesn't get better, then sayonara.
Yeah.
We missed a question. This one is from Vi, and she asks, which is mightier, the +2 Vorpal pen or the +3 flame touch sword?
Okay, so mathematically the sword is better. Yeah, on average you'll do more damage. I don't know how useful a Vorpal pen is, because you're not going to be wanting to, every time you write the number 20, slice the top off your paper. So I don't know. I would say depends what you're trying to achieve, I guess, you know?
So check it out. The Vorpal pen seems like it would be fantastic, right? Because what, 19 and 20 cuts people's heads off, which is really, really powerful. except that the pin's not technically a weapon, so you'd be at disadvantage for every single attack because it would be an improvised weapon, and that's just not sound.
Right. And reach, you got more reach with the sword. It's literally on fire, so you can light your way in the dark. Like, it just seems a useful tool.
Exactly. Light your cigarettes.
Yeah. Mathematically, I would take a flame touch almost every time, because 2d6 is a lot of dice to be rolling on top of your usual stuff. And then if you're a paladin, you can, like, you get great weapon master, then you're, like, really starting to reap the benefits here.
You juice it up through the floor. Yeah, absolutely. Great question. Great question.
Thank you.
Okay. We have another question here, and this one is the other question from Nicholas Jaquette, and he asks, when do you keep secrets from players? Do players knowing something make it less interesting? Not saying might create a situation where the players feel offended or unhappy with the outcome.
It's a broad question. I would say that keeping secrets in a certain kind of game is the game. So in a game of Game of Thrones or something like that, Westeros, like, secrets and lies and stuff like that is sort of part of the game. Sometimes I can feel really bad for gotchaing players, like, because a character betrays them or whatever, because players can be like, what? But I loved them. It's like, well, they didn't love you, and they were trying to convince you of, like, but that can feel really mean and really unfriendly and really unpleasant. But I think that's another, go back to our old friend Session Zero sort of situation, where you explain the tone and the setting and the kind of thing that happened in the setting, and then it's okay to keep secrets. But I guess I don't know if that's what he means by keeping secrets. But I don't really know necessarily.
Yeah, I don't know. It kind of sounds like that interpretation at least would ring true. I can't think of what other secrets you would be other than like personal secrets, and there's no reason to even wander into that territory. That's a whole nother nightmare.
I think, like, there's everything the players know about the world, you tell them, so there has to be a fair chance for them to see a secret coming. So if you just pull out there's an army at your door, that's rude, right? There has to be ways for them to see this coming. There has to, it's like a good murder mystery. It's only good if you could have figured it yourself, but didn't,
Exactly. Yep.
And so if you are just literally not giving them information and then surprising them with information they couldn't have seen coming, then that's not good. But if you lay the groundwork and set some things and little bits and pieces here and there, when it happens, they should go, oh, right? Like, that's the difference, is that they could have seen it coming, 100%. But they didn't see it coming. Like, huge difference there, right? It's why the BBC Sherlock is bad, right? Because he figures out things that you couldn't have possibly figured out, and why Knives Out is so good, I think, personally. If the players can figure it out and didn't, great. You've made them look stupid, but in a way that they think is fun and rewarding. If you give them no information and you just dunk on them, then it's like, okay, cool. A meteor falls in your head. That's the same thing, right? Like,
yeah, yeah, exactly. And that was going to be my answer. I tend to think of it. I tend to think of my games very cinematically anyways. That's just the way that I create story in my brain, because I've consumed so much television and movies. It's kind of my preferred storytelling medium. That when I'm running games, that's just the way that my brain filters everything. So I very much think about it like a television series or a movie is structured. And just like Lloyd said, if a secret comes out at the very, very end and there were no clues along the way, then it's a horrible secret.
Mm-hmm.
It's no good, because nobody's going to look at that and think, oh, how clever.
Yeah.
They're
going to look at
it's not clever.
Bullshit.
Yeah. You're going to look at it and think, the writers thought of this last episode and just shoehorned it in here.
Right.
But if you can look back or even go rewatch, in the case of like television and movies, and you can see those breadcrumbs that have been seeded all along the way, and then there's the payout, the big reveal. that's the reward. That's the, oh shit, and your mind is blown,
Totally.
and it recontextualizes everything that came before. And that kind of thing can be difficult to know, like how much is too much to mete out to your players. But in my opinion, you're never as obvious as you think you are. So go more obvious than you think you need to be.
Yeah.
And then just don't follow up with questions afterwards. If somebody's like, oh, wait a second, I think, this is the big overarching thing. Well, maybe they just can't quite find enough information to confirm that yet. Let them hold on to that suspicion, because that's going to build the tension. And am I right? Are we on the right path? And eventually you can start to seed out more and more breadcrumbs to let them know whether or not that could be the right guess, or more information about it. And that's the way that you build long-term investment a lot of times.
Yeah.
Is that discovery of a secret.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, it's super important. I do think like just dunking on your players or like dropping a secret they couldn't have seen coming is very unpleasant. They have to have the ability to at least guess at it, or have an inkling somehow.
Yeah.
Okay. I think Barker just posted a huge question.
Yeah. Let me see. Grab it here.
Hello, Barker.
Yeah. Hey, he asks, I just started with a new group that's almost all mechanics, little role play or fluidity. The opposite of what I'm used to, but I'm loving it. It feels more relaxing. And I'm wondering if y'all can speak to keeping the narrative to a minimum on occasion. Seems like it could help for quick encounters and meaningful mechanics and a less stressful experience. But where and when and how often would you apply the style without completely removing narrative elements of a game?
Yeah, that's interesting. My home game is pretty much that too. It's a lot of cracking jokes and a lot of rolling bones, and that's pretty much it. They don't typically inhabit the characters very much, and that's fine. It's fun. It's relaxing. It's not. You don't have to keep in mind all these different moving pieces or whatever. It's just like, okay, there's 4 guys that are trying to kill you, and then they try and kill them. That's the game, which is great. I think it's hard to put that into a narrative style game. To be like, okay, we're stepping outside of our thing we do every week and have done for ages, and now we're just gonna. But I think what you could do is, you've done this sometimes, not this exactly, but where you put a mini game into the campaign. And I think you could do something like that if you wanted to just straight up have like a fun time rolling dice and playing a little thing. You're playing a Harbinger campaign, and then you decide we're just gonna do like a kick-ass BattleTech mech game or something, or like a mecha hack or something. Just drop it in for one game or one session or whatever, and have fun with it, I guess. But I think it could be tricky if you're running a long-term narrative game and then suddenly you drop that from the game.
Yes. Yeah, I think it's probably easier to fit a loose narrative onto the frame of a mechanics heavy game as opposed to the other way around. If you're taking a very narrative game and you're going to shoehorn something that is very mechanically intense into the middle of it, I think that's a really jarring experience. It can be done, but I would do it with a really gentle touch. Do something mechanically interesting, but not just a, here's the rules that we're going to be playing strictly by for the next 4 hours. Most people who are narrative players are going to tune out of that.
Yeah.
But I think as far as like how to, sorry about the dogs, how to keep a narrative going when a group's focus is so heavily on the mechanical side.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it really just comes down to window dressing. Honestly, it's about taking the rote cycle of rolling dice and calculating what it does and all that kind of stuff, and using the tone and the genre and the setting as a palate cleanser. When you're on round number 5 and everybody's kind of like, bored of, everybody's turns taking so long, and somebody rolls a really great result on their dice, stop and take a moment and like talk about how badass this looks, blow it out of proportion, and then you can go back to what you're doing.
Yeah, you can add little narratives too in a combat, I think. Like I'll often with my home game, like if there's like 6 of them, and if they run into a room and they're fighting like 4 guards and 3 skeletons or whatever, like they'll often break off and fight different people, and I'll set each one as like a duel or whatever. It's an easy thing to do, sort of, you know, narrate their attack and how it sort of hit and how, or it didn't hit or whatever. And then you just keep in mind what happened, and you go back to it, and like, okay, now the guy, you've like just scratched his armor, and now he like takes a step back and then actually faints, and little things like that to have each little thing feel narrative without having the players like worry too much about like narrating this beautiful thing or thinking about their character's thoughts in the moment. You can still describe the action sort of narratively, I think, and have the feeling of like a narrative game, or have still the immersion that exists, if that's something you're looking for,
Right. Well, I think also a good way that would be to handle it, and I think this would be really fun for a game where the combat is so much of the focus, is have the outcome of each of these combats be a pivot. So, and it's, they know that going into it, it's okay, approaching this conflict, that it's going to go one of two ways. And you're going to decide, the outcome of this battle by your roles and your decisions, which of those two it's going to be. And then just move to the next logical point. If they, the fail it forward mechanic that a lot of legacy board games use. You're playing Imperial Assault, and you get into this one mission, and as the rebels, you all fail and the Empire succeeds. The story doesn't stop. You don't have to redo the mission or whatever. It's now you go into the next scenario, understanding that the Imperial has won. They've gained some kind of advantage or foothold. And now you're on the defensive, as opposed to being able to be the ones who dictate where the next conflict takes place. Those kinds of things. I think that's little nuggets. I guess a way to think about it would be like, what are those Tinker Toys? You have the sticks and the wheels. The sticks are the combats, the encounters. The wheels are your narrative. So you just decide where it fits into that narrative, and then where the next conflict spokes off of it. And I think that's plenty of narrative for people who are, combat focused, and it still gives their combat legitimacy. There's a point to doing it. It's no, I got to try really, really hard to make sure that we get the crowned jewel before we have to fall back, or else, the bad outcome, the one that we don't want, is going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I've been playing Star Wars Legion with Keel for a long time. Parker played 1 or 2 games of this as well, and it's like a narrative miniatures game. It's not designed that way, but we sort of play it that way. And so in the mission, occasionally we'll sort of narrate, like we'll zoom in, like it's a war game, so there's tons of people. We'll zoom in to see like how these guys are reacting to this thing, or like what it looks like when the Force user leaps across the battlefield, or that sort of stuff. And then at the end of that mission, that battle, that literal war game we're playing, will sort of decide based on how it went where it would go next. And that's sort of where the same sort of thing you were saying, where the narrative comes in. Like you're playing the game, and that's the game, and then between you can drop in these things like, okay, well, because this happened, we go here. But if this had happened, we would have gone here, sort of thing,
Yeah, and I don't think you have to get into, talking in character and things like that if that's not what the focus of the game is, if that's not what your players want. You can just say, the evil galactic emperor has now decided that because of your actions on, Zelta Prime, now they're going to attack your home world because they discovered where you came from, or whatever, And I think that's enough narrative to get most people invested. If they're truly there to just really kind of play a tactical style game, I think that's more than enough.
Yeah. I find for me, it's like really relaxing to play, like, because I play a lot of like, and we all sort of do play a lot of very narrative, very intense games. It's like super fun to just like roll some dice and kick ass, and, and not worry about that element of it so much. There can be a bit of a feeling sometimes, I think, this idea that like, oh, well, you're not really playing properly if you're not, really getting into it. It's like, it's totally fine to just like fucking roll some dice and be like, and then my guy chops his head off. Hey, like, that's great. That's super fun,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. I'm very fortunate that I get to experience both in my life, and I know that a lot of people don't. So I'm incredibly spoiled in that regard. You know, we get to do the miniatures and the terrain and the battle mats and that very tactile, you know, getting to actually touch something and
Yeah.
roll physical dice, and then, you know, I get to come online and play games that are really emotionally deep and
Right.
have a lot of development as far as characters and story go. So I'm really happy that I have both of those. But yeah, like it's beer and pretzel D&D is every bit as valid
Totally.
Dungeons and Dragons as you know what we see on things like Critical Role and other shows like that. 100%.
Okay, is that it? Do we do it?
Yeah, man. No, I think that's it. That's all the questions that I've got. Unless
Awesome.
anybody from the audience wants to toss out anything else,
Any last
we're caught
minute
up with that.
questions?
Yeah.
Well, hopefully that helped.
Yeah, man.
We had a little psychology detour in the middle, which was interesting. Hopefully we didn't like give terrible advice or anything, but
Again, if there were emails, go to Lloyd.
yeah.
So
yeah, my email address is jeremy@spiritguardians.dm. Yep.
Jeremy at lloydcollins.spiritguardian.
Okay, yeah, well, great. Thanks so much. We had a lot of people watching, so thanks for coming and hanging out. It's always nice to have people to bounce off and stuff. It's super nice. And yeah, we'll be back in a month, which would be the 21st of July.
That sounds right.
Third, right? Third, yeah.
Third Wednesday.
Third Wednesday. That would be the 21st of July. We'll be back then with more of this. And yeah, check out Jeremy's channel. Obviously, you probably know who he is if you're here, but his games are the best. Just actually the best. And then also this weekend, there's like a charity event happening. If you don't know about this, MTD especially is organizing this charity event for A Game to Grow, which is a really valuable charity, and I'm working on that as well with Big Braided Nerd, and Jeremy will be running a game as well as like some famous people.
Hell yeah.
I don't know who they are because I don't watch anyone play D&D, but they're famous apparently.
There's some people out there.
Yeah. They're definitely D&D famous, so if you want to come and check those out and donate, that would be awesome, because we're trying to raise some money for a good cause. Also, not AdCon is happening the same weekend. Also, donations there are going to Game to Grow, so check that out also. Yeah, that's the most plugging I've ever done. I don't know about plugging as a verb. Immediately had to rethink that one.
Met Twitter's quota and surpassed it, perhaps.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks everyone for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye.